Welcome, one and all, to another edition of the Defo Show with Lubie here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. The NFL playoffs are here. The Dolphins are not a part of it. We talk about the Miami Dolphins offseason ahead, where they made no moves going into the offseason. We'll see what moves are made in the offseason to correct a season where the Dolphins went backwards. And we'll talk NFL playoffs with a guy we love talking to. I'm sure you know him well. Been covering South Florida sports a long time. Chris Perkins, Miami Dolphins columnist for the Sun Sentinel, joins us here talking Dolphins and NFL playoffs. The Defo Show with Lubie on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
We always enjoy talking to this gentleman here. Chris Perkins, are you okay?
I'm fine.
Now, we want to completely blow off any kind of Dolphin talk, unless there is something there whether you're talking about.
I had Dolphins questions.
Are you obligated in the Sun Sentinel to just put something in a column that says nothing of any significance is happening right now, and not that anything will happen anytime soon?
Well, you know what? The good thing about the Dolphins is there's always something going on. And look, Tyreek still hasn't issued any type of retraction, right? I don't want to be traded. I don't want out of here. And would you believe him if he did? Come on, that's kind of where we're at right now with that deal. Look, you still got the situation with backup quarterback. Like, what are you going to do at backup quarterback? What route are you going to take? You see what all these running backs did this weekend, the newly acquired guys. You see what happens when you get home field advantage for the first round of the playoffs. So there's still stuff we can beat them over the head with, Defo. I mean, come on. It's the Dolphins.
Yeah, it just seems like that there's, we were talking about your appearance here on the show earlier, helping to promote the fact that you were going to join us and salvage what otherwise was a meandering nothingness type of show. And we were thinking, they really aren't doing anything. Now there was a statement made or issued in some fashion by Drew Rosenhaus, who represents Tyreek Hill and a zillion other players, but he implied that Tyreek Hill was all in on being with the Dolphins, that maybe that was just post-lousy season frustration that he was expressing how he wanted out of here. So do you buy into that at all, or do you have to give that any credibility?
No, you know what? I don't think that Tyreek wants to be traded. To me, Drew didn't clear anything up. He might have confused stuff. So I was right there for the interview with Tyreek after the Jets game. And, look, here's what I've said is that, Tyreek was forced to talk, which he should talk. He's a team leader. It's the season finale. It's a disappointing loss. It's a disappointing way to end the season. Fans want to hear from you as a team leader. So he's talking. But Tyreek usually makes eye contact when he speaks, and he usually speaks very firmly and assertively. And even if he's joking around, on this particular interview, his eyes are kind of darting around. He's looking up. He's looking down. I just think the words just tumbled out of his mouth. I want out of here. I want out. And then he had to kind of back it up after he said it. But look, he said probably like 15 or 20 times, he loves it here. He wants to retire here. I mean, who else is going to treat him better than Mike McDaniel? Who else is going to put up with all his crap? Other than, Kansas City was like, look, dude, you're out of here before you can really start affecting this team. The Dolphins are probably one of the few teams that would put up with this from Tyreek. I don't think Tyreek wants out of here at all. But as far as Drew, Drew said that he thinks that Tyreek is committed. But he also said he hadn't spoken to Tyreek. So how do you know he's committed? And then he says that Tyreek had a broken wrist during the joint practices against the Washington Commanders. Tyreek had come out before and said he had a torn ligament in the wrist. So I still don't know what to believe about Tyreek, even after the Drew Rosenhaus interview.
Well, you said something there that's interesting, the stuff about who's going to be nicer to Tyreek than Mike McDaniel. It's come out in the last week or so since the end of the season. Look, Mike McDaniel always came off as the player's coach, the buddy guy, whatever. He wasn't demonstrative enough and all that. But we've seen coaches of all kinds, so you sort of just go with it. But the fact that players were coming out saying, he needs to be this, he needs to be that. People around the organization were coming out, he needs to be this, be that. how in year 4, like that's the thing that a lot of people have asked, and I agree with them in that regard. Is the guy is this is what he is. He's gonna do a 180 in year 4. Like he needs to be more demanding. They need to have the fines weren't working, so he needs to do this. He needs to do that. It's like, okay, well, like what are you saying? He needs to be a totally different coach. Well, he's the coach. Like it goes in line with all the stuff. I was wondering why they're retaining him. If you're asking him to change everything about himself, why are they like? I don't understand the retention of Mike McDaniel if you openly admit there's major issues with Mike McDaniel.
Here's the retention of Mike McDaniel. His mistake in insisting that Tua gets a contract extension, to me, is the only thing keeping him there.
Oh.
I was against this extension, as you guys know, because my reasoning was, if this season bottomed out, which it did, I'd have taken a broom to all 3 of them. Grier, McDaniel, Tua, get out of here. We're starting over. Wow. Well, now that you signed Tua to that flawed contract extension, 4 years, $212 million, which you only signed him to, remember, because he had one great training camp practice and Mike McDaniel went crazy, banged on the table inside to Stephen Ross. You've got to give this guy an extension. So they end up giving him this contract extension. And so, listen, now that Tua is here, who is the one who gets the most out of Tua? Mike McDaniel. And who works well with Mike McDaniel? Chris Grier. Yeah. You remember where Mike McDaniel said when he found out that Calais might be going to Baltimore, he threw an adult temper tantrum. If Chris Grier was going somewhere, he would throw an adult temper tantrum, because it's kind of like how Tyreek gets away with stuff with McDaniel. Chris Grier pretty much does everything Mike McDaniel wants. Mike McDaniel pretty much runs the organization from the filling out the roster standpoint. So that's why he's back. And I'll tell you this also, Lubie, all of this stuff about the players and being late to meetings constantly, what a sign of disrespect toward Mike McDaniel. Like, the guy who takes up for you endlessly will not rip you in public, despite how many passes you drop, Tyreek, despite how many wrong routes you run. This dude does not take shots at his players in public. And your thanks is, I'll show up late to this meeting. I'll be late to this meeting. Who cares? All he's going to do is find me. I'll write a check. Come on. Your team has to be better than that. Respect the game. Respect your coach. Respect your teammates. Like, this is why I say this team is fundamentally flawed and needs a culture change. Like, be a freaking professional. Like, at least show up for work on time.
Yeah, that would make some sense. I don't know that Shula would have stood for it. Jimmy would have got some special teams player that wasn't of any great significance just to make a point. And it's terrible. Look, in any job that you have, you should try and treat it with the kind of respect that would come under the banner of being a professional, and especially if you're making the kind of money they are in the pros. Mike McDaniel has helped a lot of those guys get filthy rich.
Get paid, yep.
You would have to think that they would want to reciprocate that type of respect. All right, let's get into the postseason so far. Let's start with the magic question, because I keep talking to people, Chris Perkins, and they imply that the Kansas City Chiefs are a cinch to make their way into the Super Bowl. Now you wouldn't think that Houston would be an overwhelming hurdle. You don't have to be Skeets Nehemiah to clear that one, but always upsets are always a possibility. We saw 3 underdogs win outright in the 6 games that took place over the weekend. And yet, most people would say, and it's cliche-esque, but nonetheless, that, well, whoever wins the Baltimore-Buffalo game, that's your AFC champion. What's your thought on that? Now, where do we pin Kansas City at this stage? Are they, in some people's opinion, literally, Chris, they're a cinch to at least get into the Super Bowl and likely to three-peat. Do you feel the same way?
No. Now, look, they're my favorite in the AFC because they're at home and they've been there before, and they've got this magic spell over Buffalo that, Buffalo has just got to be praying that Houston takes Kansas City out, right? They want no part of Kansas City. But, I think there's 3 teams in both conferences to me. Really, it's going to be Baltimore, Kansas City, and Buffalo in the AFC. And then in the NFC, I'm thinking that it's Detroit and Philly And who am I leaving out?
The Rams were pretty interesting last night.
The Rams were interesting. But you know what? I'll say this. One thing that really stands out to me about the first round of the playoffs is not the quarterbacks that won, but the home teams that won. And as it relates to the Dolphins, it just drives home the importance of you've got to get home field for that first round of the playoffs. But it just gives you such a huge advantage, no pun intended. I mean, you've got to get home field, Dolphins.
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, after the disappointment of this past season, I'm not sure I even think the Dolphins are playoff bound next year. I mean, they only needed to win a couple of more games, but that dead flat performance in the final game of the regular season, albeit with Huntley in there at quarterback, didn't impress me. The effort and guys quitting, like you mentioned, Tyreek Hill leaves the game in the fourth quarter. Again, a massive sign of disrespect for Mike McDaniel. All right, and last night's game of great consequence as the Rams prevail over a Minnesota team. People were crying, Chris, about seedings, and I believe this is totally cyclical. It was just kind of unusual that both in the college football playoff, some of the conference winners that got the bye in the first round were not the strongest teams. I would think that would be a trend that was marginal because usually if you win the SEC, you're a hell of a team, right?
Yes.
Or any of these conferences. But then same thing was said about the way the playoffs are seeded. Do you think that there needs to be some kind of change? They're talking about reseeding teams, and I believe they do that in hockey at this point, but I haven't followed it closely enough to see if they reverted back to their old ways. But I thought this was just somewhat of an aberration this year, where you had division winners. You might always have one weak one or maybe even two, but in general, don't you think the system is okay the way it is, or would you like to see some kind of a change?
No, I like the system the way it is. And here's kind of, I kind of look at the NCAA basketball tournament as the model for the tournaments. And what I love about the NCAA basketball tournament is in the early rounds, you get these David versus Goliath matchups, and you want to see the young guy, the upstart team, the little known team knock off the big team. But in the end, one of the blue bloods pretty much always wins, right? North Carolina, Kentucky, you're going to have your FAU in the Final Four and your St. Joe's in the Final Four. And that's a lot of fun. And it would be great if one of them could win it one day. But to me, kind of, the system works because the best team wins. Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, Villanova, whoever. To me, that proves that the system wins. But you just want to me, in the early rounds, you want to see the possibility of an upset. I think if like a St. Joe's won, it's a great story, but you always wonder, did the best team in the nation really win? So I call me old school. I like the system. I think it works.
So you talked about the Chiefs are your front runner, but you don't have them outpacing the pack. You have them like in the group. And I mean, look, the only thing I think that benefits them is the Ravens-Bills should be a freaking war. And I know the Texans won decidedly and they're feeling themselves. They weren't great. They limped down the finish. They won't be at home much longer. Are they even home? I don't even know if they're home this week. They're not home versus the Chiefs. They're home versus the Chiefs. They're home versus the Chiefs. Yeah. Like they were nice, and their defense carried Stroud, who's taken a massive step backwards. Their running game carried him because he's not the same guy he was last year, which is fine. I mean, he played sort of above his head last year. But that's who the Chiefs have to face, and those two teams are going to kill each other. So it feels like they sort of get a little bit benefit with that. When you talk about the NFC, the Rams are interesting. The Packers were the other team that was hanging around, but they're now out of it. Yep. The Eagles and the Lions seem to be toe-to-toe. Look, you talk about home field. Home field feels like it'll be as big an advantage for anyone as it will be for the Lions. I mean, this franchise has been as beleaguered as any and all of sports. At one point, they were like what the Marlins are to football. And to see them there, my problem with the Lions, and I know you covered him, and I know a lot of people down here loved him because he was fun to cover. The Dan Campbell, I'm going for no matter what strategy, which has helped propel them. It also fucked them last year, point blank, in the playoffs. and it's to me become very questionable. And yes, regular season, you're scoring tons of points, you're pushing, but in the playoffs, just getting any points a lot of the time is the deciding factor between winning and losing. Where are you when it comes to the NFC? Because it feels like the Lions are starting to distance themselves, but Dan Campbell scares the living crap out of me as a head coach in one of those key situations where you should just not overthink it, and he tends to always overthink it and overplay it.
Dan is an emotional coach, and let's face it, probably one of the reasons that they're where they are is because of his emotion.
Yes.
So you kind of have to take that with Dan Campbell, right? That's just part of the Dan Campbell experience. Like, how many people are on, how many defensive players are on IR for them? Like 12 or something? There's like something, but I think Campbell's emotion is kind of what gets you, it's kind of what gets you over the hump, that rah-rah stuff. And the rolling the dice on strategy, well, that's part of it. Didn't he do that again recently with one of the last few games of the regular season?
Yes.
I think
he did this week.
Right.
You know,
they're off this week. They're off
Chris,
this week, last week.
You know, when a guy's taking potential points off the board, he's at the opposition's 32-yard line, so he's going to have to go for maybe a 49-yard field goal, and you're thinking most of these NFL kickers are making anything inside of 50 or the majority of those kicks. And when he goes for like a 4th and 5 in that situation, you're asking yourself, is that smart? Or, I mean, is it more of a crisis when he's at his own 17 and he goes for a 4th and 1? But it's become far more common. You know, it's funny. We used to think that these guys were such pathetic wimps, these coaches. Look at the, maligning of Tony Sperano, which I guess maligning is not the right word because
it was justified.
But fans and even, media members that are formulating and helping guide people to an opinion on situations, they always thought, wow, what a fucking wimp. I mean, how could you not go for that? And now people are going for it, but I guess you have to, have some kind of critical judgment about when it's an extreme.
Exactly.
You know what's funny is I'm old school like you are, Defo, and I think analytics have almost ruined the game from that standpoint. I mean, if we want to talk about the shifts in baseball, which thank goodness have been outlawed, the propensity for 3-point shooting in the NBA, right? Like the analytics tell you you're better off shooting a 3-pointer than a mid-range jumper.
Sure.
And so that's kind of, in football, that's kind of what you see on a lot of the 4th downs and a lot of that kind of stuff, that the analytics tell you you're better off going for it. I think Campbell is more of a coach from the gut guy than analytics. I don't know that for a fact, though. He might be more analytics than gut, but
it doesn't appear that way. I mean, he looks like Cro-Magnon man there on the side. Thinking he's counting skulls, not dissecting with a calculus stick there what to do in 4th down.
Yeah, but you know what? It's what strikes me though, Lubie, is going back to Detroit, and everybody being at home, I think is going to help tremendously because Buffalo. I mean, you look at how well Josh Allen plays at home. I know at one point they had scored 30 points at least 30 in every home game. I don't know if that held up through the entire season. But and then Philly, that Vic Fangio defense, baby. I mean, the Dolphins players, you should have listened to Vic. They knew what he was talking about. And of course, Detroit being and Kansas City. Look, as much as we say about Kansas City, though, I still maintain they won that Super Bowl last year with their defense. Yep. And if they win it again this year, it'll be with their defense, with Chris Jones and Trent McDuffie at cornerback, Chris Jones on the interior defensive line, and all those dudes, man. That is a nasty, nasty defense.
Couple of quick things here. Your opinion on the Buffalo-Baltimore game. Everybody, I mean, look, Derrick Henry obviously has established himself as a major force. Takes a lot of pressure off Lamar Jackson. Jackson has responded this year in top-notch fashion to all of the criticism. I keep talking about a friend of mine who absolutely is apoplectic about what a rat Lamar Jackson is for the amount of money he's torched in big playoff spots. And, he's even alluded to some of the things that you would have to say were way beyond being politically correct about Lamar Jackson in response to the amount of money that has been put to a blowtorch when he's backed him. But What do you make of this? I mean, Josh Allen swashbuckling his way, especially at home. And are you also secretly hoping for blizzard conditions that day? Or would you like to see the game played under as pristine circumstances as possible for Buffalo at that time of the year? Because it would be more of a true test of who the champion team really is.
I don't care about the weather because both of these teams play in rugged weather, right? I love one thing I love about the AFC North. It's all outdoor football, baby. December and January, you better be a grown-ass man to go to to go to Pittsburgh, to go to Cleveland, to go to Cincy, to go to Baltimore. I love that division in December and January. So I think Baltimore would be equipped with the shame. I wish this was the Super Bowl because I would love to see either quarterback win the Super Bowl. I would love to see Derrick Henry be the key to a team getting to the Super Bowl, but both of them can't win, so may the best team win. But I really, really, really wish this was the Super Bowl.
Well, and as we were saying, the cliche could be that this is going to decide the Super Bowl champion, which we're rooting for our buddy Dylan Rossi, who collects $480,000 on his 5-component parlay. Chris, you would love this. If the Ravens ultimately prevail in the Super Bowl. How tempting would it be? It's almost like being on Let's Make a Deal, right? Where they say, well, I'll give you $500 if you opt out now.
Oh, man.
Make it $1,000, but that's a nice piece of change to be sitting on, and I'm sure the buyout is very tempting at various stages. But if they get by Buffalo, then you certainly have to think, okay, this is more than a realistic possibility. All right, one last thing. Sanders, Deion.
Yeah.
Is he NFL coaching material in your opinion?
Man, I'm going to give the worst possible answer you can give on a talk show. I don't know. I heard Lubie going off.
Lubie hates Deion Sanders.
Yeah, I can't say
I don't know if this dude can coach, man. I really don't. I know that he can. Here's what I think. I think that from what I've seen, he's a better strategist than Mario Cristobal.
That's not hard.
From what I've seen,
my dog Skippy over here is a better strategist.
But what does that get you? A job in the Southland Conference? I mean, I don't know. So I hate to wimp out. I would say I would love to see him with Dallas because Jerry, I was there when Jerry recruited him from San Francisco as a player to play for the Cowboys. And they had this great Pizza Hut commercial because you remember at that time Deion played offense and defense.
Yep.
Yes.
And they had this great Pizza Hut commercial of Jerry saying, "What do you want to play, Deion?" And Deion would say both. And so I don't know. There was some pizza that they were promoting, but these two deserve each other. These two would love working together. ESPN would become even more of the Dallas Cowboys network, but that's fine. I can ignore them. It would be a lot of fun for everybody. But Lubie, so I don't know if the dude can coach. I really don't.
You make me feel better about my take when you say, because I rant and rave about it, but I'm like, maybe I'm wrong. They keep getting better, so maybe he's this magical coach that in hiding, but like people around the sport are like, yeah, that he doesn't coach. Like he's like, I hear that consistently, so it's like, all right, at least I'm not totally insane.
But you know what, Lubie, if you are smart enough to set up an infrastructure around yourself, like Bobby Bowden did in his last couple of years, where the thing ran itself, and he just kind of spoke to the players, at the end of the day before that. It can work, but Deion is such a young coach. You would like to think the dude is more of a strategist in his earliest days, right?
Yeah, Bobby wasn't doing that in the 80s.
Correct.
Like Bobby was making his name.
Right.
Bad gum, boys. You played a good game.
Deion just started. Like to be there at the beginning, like that's a lot.
Bobby, though, I mean, his methods wouldn't work today. I mean, where he would have a stomach for Mama's meatloaf and somehow come out with the kid signed, and now
That's right.
you have to bring a mathematician with you, an accountant, a CPA if you're the head coach to come and recruit the kid. And the kid's sitting on the couch not with his grandmother, but with his agent. So
that's right. Yeah, you have to bring Andy Ellisberg, the salary capologist.
Right? He's a capologist coming out there. Yeah. I don't know, Clemson. Can you really go over $100 million? NIL. What are these kids promoting? I don't see them on any commercials.
It's never about NIL. It's actually just
it's not Restrepo selling like Kias from some obscure used car lot on 441. Well, how does that justify a $5 million endorsement deal? It's amazing. All right, Chris, we love you, man. Good job. We'll look forward to any news that comes out of the Miami Dolphins facility regarding the possible improvement and future endeavors of the team. And it's always a pleasure having you on the show. Even frozen, you look good.
Even frozen from the Perkins estate with the swimming pool in the background there.
That's the best part of it, man.
We love you, Perk.
I know you're going right out there and diving in a pool like Greg Louganis, man. Just right with his swan.
All right, gentlemen.
Thanks, my friend. Always a pleasure. Chris Perkins, ladies and gentlemen.
You weren't wrong to talk playoffs, so I was like, fine. But the thing I brought up, it's the thing I keep hearing, and it's like, so all of our fears about Mike McDaniel are true. He's too easy on the players.
Yeah.
And now you want him to change? Okay. And again, coaches grow over time. We know coaches grow over stops and failures and age and experience. But is he going to do it from 1 year to the next? The
guy might be two out there.
He is. Well, might be. Yes. I mean, he clearly is.
He might be. I wasn't sure. I mean, you don't want to make some kind of seemingly definitive judgment based on a very short sample size. But this year of Mike McDaniel didn't impress me in one bit, not one bit, because I don't know. I mean, he managed one game with an inept backup quarterback. It was the Huntley game, 2 games before the end of the season, where Huntley had a big ball game. He went like 22 for 29 or something, or even better than that. They won the game. It wasn't particularly pretty, but and you thought, okay, that's not a bad coaching job.
They played in the net Browns team that was literally just doing nothing on offense. But remember, the game, that's the funny thing is, everyone remembers the end. That game was close into the third.
That's true.
Remember, they got 2 stupid-ass touchdowns that made the game look more impressive. Like, they were also doing, it was like 6-3 at like half or something. But
it's like when you have an injury and you can't hit your backhand or something.
Yeah, can you figure out
a way to win? So now you're trying to run around every shot. And look, maybe you find a way to win the game. To me, that's a sign of a decent coaching anyway, because he was certainly compromised from what he normally would want to do.
100%.
Yeah, but I'm not super impressed with. I mean, seems like a guy that you would genuinely would like to see him succeed, but that doesn't impress me right now as a strategist as much as he did in the beginning when you thought, wow, this man is a wild man.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing things that are so far out there that it'll take the league forever to catch up. But it seems to me they caught up.
Yes, by halfway through the season they caught up.
Like they're laughing at these little slant patterns
100%.
and all of this. They're screaming at the refs, say it's a pick, and it's just not happening.
Always a good time talking with the one and only Chris Perkins, Miami Dolphins columnist. Has covered South Florida sports a long time. Covered the Heat. I know he's covered some of the other organizations down here. He's done some national stuff. He's done the Dolphins for a while now. And yes, he covers and follows the NFL. So talk a little NFL playoffs. But the Dolphins are his main beat. And it's funny, they didn't change the coach, even though I thought they should. They didn't change the GM, even though everyone around the NFL and the fan base thought they should. And the quarterback is still there. They gave him an extension. And then he missed 5 to 6 games. I guess 6. He missed 6 games this season. Tua Tagovailoa. Going to be a very interesting offseason. Heading into the offseason, you have star players questioning Mike McDaniel aloud. And that's what I talked about and I referred to there with Chris. It's going to be interesting. We'll see. It's hard for me to have faith and hope. You see all these other franchises around the AFC strong, getting better. And the Dolphins seem to be going backwards. Not only disgruntled stars, but they have major issues on the offensive and defensive line. They have major issues at the quarterback position with health. And they have major issues in the front office and at head coach, and they're doing nothing about it. I get that part. Once you went with Tua, you sort of had to stick with McDaniel. I don't know why you had to stick with Grier, and where the holes are the issues he's not dealt with. He's tried to draft and bring in free agents and trade to bolster the offensive line, and it hasn't gotten better. So why would you think now he's going to make it better? He hasn't addressed the quarterback position, especially a backup quarterback. Why now would he make that better? The defense doesn't have playmakers. Like Jalen Ramsey is a good player. He's not the playmaker he once was. Javon Holland was a playmaker 2 years ago. The last 2 years, he's fallen off a fucking cliff, to be brutally honest. The linebacker position has been a disaster since Zach Thomas. You don't have a playmaker there. Defensive line. Your best defensive lineman was a guy who's in his 60s in Calais Campbell, and you just pulled out of your ass right before the season. They need playmakers on defense. They don't have it. He's never been able to draft that. Van Ginkel actually was sort of a playmaker. I know he's doing things in Minnesota, which just lost and is out of the playoffs. But Van Ginkel wasn't like a star playmaker. He's a guy that was a playmaker alongside other playmakers. Like, you bring in Chubb to be a playmaker, he's always hurt. You bring in Phillips, who showed signs of playmaking ability, and he's always hurt. Chris Grier is good at drafting and bringing in guys that are hurt all the time that you thought may be playmakers, but they're not. And yet you keep him intact. So it's hard to have expectations for the Dolphins because it feels like they're going backwards. It feels like their head coach really just doesn't get it. And he's a play caller who's bad at play calling. And he's not really a head coach. And now he's supposed to turn everything around and become a hard-nosed, disciplined head coach, which that's not his thing. So I don't know. I hate being this negative because I was so positive heading into the year. But it just feels like they're a sinking ship and they're trying to cover up the holes in the boat with Band-Aids instead of actually fixing the holes on the boat. So it'll be an interesting or boring. Or no, Perk's right, like you said at the beginning. There's always something with the Dolphins, so it'll be interesting. I don't know if it'll be fruitful or helpful season for the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Heat continue to play up and down basketball after winning 2 in a row. They struggled versus the Clippers. This is a fun thing about this era of basketball. Everything's a three-point shot. Okay, fine. But like if your three-point shot's off, why do you keep chucking? Like the Heat shot 52 threes and were horrendous at the three-point ball against the Clippers on Monday night. Wouldn't you, like, curtail the three, get to the basket? It's not like the Clippers have a juggernaut defensive force and they're scary in the middle. I don't know. That's my problem with this live and die by the three basketball. It's fine if you're hot, fine. Keep taking the open threes. You're getting good shots. But to shoot 52 threes on a night where you're not shooting the three well, it just doesn't make any sense. And I just don't get it. And I know Spo was sort of one of the founding fathers of small ball. And that's fine, but can't you still work the ball and get to the basket? Can't you? It's okay to take some mid-range jumpers. I don't know. The Miami Heat are in a weird spot. They're still hovering between the 6th to 8th seed in the East, and they're still within 2 to 3 games of the 4, and not that far from the 3 either, but it just feels like a weird season. The Butler stuff is looming. I like their approach to the Butler stuff, to be brutally honest. You're not going to trade him for nothing, and you don't want him around the team if he's going to be sulking and be disruptive. So let him be somewhere else. We'll see. His suspension's ending soon. We'll see. They're open to having him play. I don't see him just coming back and being the team guy. So they may just keep suspending him until they get a decent trade offer. The trade deadline's early February. We'll see what happens with Miami Heat there. Marlins a disaster. The Panthers are playing decent hockey. Not great, not bad. But it's the middle of the season, so you tend to meander there. The NFL playoffs move on to the divisional round. The college football title game is coming up a Monday. So we'll definitely talk about all that. Check us out each and every morning on South Florida Live, the YouTube and Facebook page. And you can check us out right here with our South Florida skewed content, the Defo Show with Lubie on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Hey folks, Tony Segreto here. Let me ask you a question. What do you look for when you go out to eat? Good food, obviously, friendly atmosphere, not too loud, but good energy, reasonable prices, and a place where you feel comfortable. All those ingredients, no pun meant there, are hard to find unless you're talking about the Texas Roadhouse. You see, they encompass all of those attributes. Really, really good food, amazing atmosphere, good for a family, good for a date, or just a night out for yourself, and prices that will make you extremely happy. Their ribs unmatched, steaks hand-cut every day. Everything, and I mean everything, is made on site, including their incredible bread. It's the one day, folks, that you can forget about low-carb diets. Trust me when I tell you, Texas Roadhouse, your restaurant, your destination when you say, where should we go and eat tonight?
These days, we're all looking for comfort anywhere we can find it. Thank goodness for Landlubbers Raw Bar and Grill in Plantation, because they are making sure you are as comfortable as possible. First of all, they're not only open for delivery and pickup. All you have to do is go to landlubbersbarandgrill.com for both pickup and free delivery. You're going to have the best wings in the world. You're going to have a great burger. You're going to have their amazing soups. Again, Landlubbers, Raw Bar and Grill. It's nice and easy. Just go to landlubbersbarandgrill.com for both your pickup and free delivery. Thank goodness for Landlubbers for making you always feel right at home.